So, 30 minutes to talk about ING's Agile journey. I was reminded this morning by Barry that not many financial institutions really aspire to be this lean enterprise. I think we really do, and we're well on the way. So I hope to give you some insights on what we've done, how we got there, and what our new big challenges are. My name is Henk, Dutch indeed, so you'll hear me struggle with my English now and then a little bit. I'm the chief architect, which means I'm responsible for how the bank works. It also means that once every 8 weeks I'm on call, like the rest of the management team. So we made all our teams responsible for not only developing but also running their applications, and we did the same for the management, so we get immediate feedback on what's going wrong. So let me take you back a little bit in time. There was a time when ING was like many other banks. We believed in waterfall and Prince2, and some process folks had even integrated Prince2 with Rational Unified Process. And they created a whole bunch of templates for it, and basically it meant that we had to do something like over 70 mandatory documents before we could even start coding. That was 5 years ago. We also had an app. And do you remember this time? It's 5 or 6 years ago. The iPhone was just out, I think. And we had an app. And our customers also had an opinion about our app, and they expressed it very well in our app, in the App Store, with giving us 1 star. And they even complained in the App Store to Apple, asking them to make it possible to give less than 1 star for an app. So that was the situation. And in 2010, 2009, we also got a new management team in, and we were very lucky to get in Ron van Kemenade, who became this new CIO, and he had been the head of internet, as it was called way back then, before. So he was really frustrated by the lack of speed that we got from our IT department. So that was good. And when he started, he said, this is a little bit the beliefs that everybody had. IT is a commodity. Do you remember that? Yeah, IT is a commodity. Everybody can do IT. We had internal customers, which was also fun to watch. When I joined ING 2 years later, I had this guy in my team who was called an account manager, because we had internal customers and he had to get the work in for my unit. The big belief that IT is a cost center and that we should try and save money every year on it. And this whole thing about quality. So ING was great in CMMI and had big programs running, tried to get better by producing lots of paper. So from this point on, it got interesting, because what these guys did, they went to a tech conference first, and they really started thinking about, hey, what we are lacking is a deep understanding of technology. So this CIO, he started a Java community, which was hip way back then. And not only did he start it, he learned to program himself. And what I really admire in this guy is that he really learned to program. He was an economist, but also the fact he's totally blind, you know. So he learned programming while having this handicap. And this was a powerful message that he sent into the organization with this. It said, hey, code is king, guys. We want you to really master programming again. So then they went on, and they started the first Scrum teams. And this basically started when my now good friend Danny Wijnand and good friend Evelijn van Leeuwen went to Ron van Kemenade and told him, hey, we are at the point of quitting. We don't want to work here anymore unless you decide to let us do Agile. And so Danny and Evelijn started this movement in the channels department where they started creating mobile apps leveraging Agile, basically, and Ron protected them. He said, okay, from now on, you don't have to adhere to our processes anymore, I'll protect you. And my other good friend, Amir Aruni, he just bought them the machines that they really wanted instead of forcing them to work with machines that were supplied to them. He went out to the shop with his own credit card and got the machines in and got things working. As you can imagine, this created a little bit of havoc and stress here and there. But then Ron really saw that these guys started to work fantastically. So after that, we said Agile is now becoming our new way of working. And we got in a lot of Scrum coaches to help us understand Agile better. And it became like the mandatory thing for the whole organization to follow. And the interesting piece was that after these first successes with mobile app development were created, everybody wanted to do it. So interestingly enough, I even saw the process consultants that adopt Agile to create a more better description of Agile, doing Agile. We saw architects trying to do Agile. We saw business people trying to do Agile and Scrum. So this really started to spark here. This little wildfire was going through the organization. This is successful, this is how we want to do it, and our senior management really supported this move to Agile, and it was enormously important to us. So then we got into the the discussions on who gets to run this. And we got to, so who gets to run this? Who gets to run the bank in production? And we came with this idea, we are going to create DevOps teams. Now, later on, I got into a little fight with Jess Humble, who said that's a really bad idea. But for us, it works. Basically, what we did is we put the operations people and the developers together in one team, which meant that from now on, we have 180 teams. And these 180 teams were responsible not only for developing the software, but also for running it into production. Meaning everybody on call, also the developers, and a lot of the hassle and fight should be gone. However, this little cultural change of going from a developer-led organization to DevOps teams also took some time to really integrate the people. We saw examples of people trying to move closets between the ops and the dev side of the same team, or trying to really do their own thing. So this took a lot of management attention also to really integrate the teams. And I am proud to say that today we are in a situation where these teams really work as one. And that's not the end of it, because what we saw then is that we had a lot of obstacles really that had to do with platforms. So we started building our private cloud. We had a lot of discussions whether our customer data was safe in the public cloud, maybe familiar to some of you. But being a Dutch bank and privacy for us is very important, we were a bit careful about that. And this summer, our commercial colleagues fully joined us, which is exceptional. So what we did is we also took down the management layers, or took away all the management layers from the commercial side. And now we have around 400 agile teams who report almost directly into 13 tribe leads and who have gotten a lot of responsibility to build and run and improve our systems. So this is where we are today. And I can tell you some of this still scares me a little bit, but I'm also really proud that we're moving at this speed. So What were some of our convictions during this journey? You heard a lot about continuous delivery. Well, continuous delivery for us is mandatory for all the teams, and we're now basically pooling all the teams onto one continuous delivery pipeline for all. We used to basically leave it to the teams. They just had to prove to us that they were doing continuous delivery, but we also saw that they had to spend a lot of time in every team to do their own build servers, get their own automated deployments. So now we created just one. Another conviction was partners are welcome and outsourcing is not. And what you hear here is a conviction that we should really master the technology ourselves. So we do not do outsourcing a lot, sometimes, but for us, understanding how to build mobile apps, how to build APIs, how to build Docker containers, how to manage them, having that understanding in the bank for us is critical. A third one, I will be talking more about this, is nothing beats engineering talent. And our focus is not process adherence anymore, but building great software. So if you walk around our buildings, you will see these big monitoring screens for each team. And one of the feedback loops that is constant is the quality of the code. Another one is how is your system behaving in production. So building great software is for us critical. And now and again, I get the chance to talk to fantastic engineers that work in different places and where they try to start to get DevOps started and where they try to get continuous delivery embedded and Agile and Scrum. And they tell me how hard it is. And I think we were very lucky because we had some great advocates of Agile, Scrum and continuous delivery in the company. So one of the convictions that you need to have in place is that IT is not working for the business, but IT is actually driving the business. IT is not a cost center, but IT is a value creator. And these sounds like big words when I say them, but it's very, very, very important that you look at it like this. Outsourcing for the lowest price. I don't want to bash the concept of outsourcing. There's probably some great examples somewhere. But I said that wrong, didn't I? But we've seen that we can easily outcompete distributed teams by having excellent engineers. And basically, the key question is having excellent engineers. Another thing that really shifted is this whole idea of buy before build. You know that architects like myself are saying that these kind of things, reuse before buy, before build, whereas we've learned now that actually building something, even a first increment or a prototype, is a great way to better understand the software that we're actually trying to find and the requirements that we need to understand more. The last one is ING used to have like this big project-like organization where as they would drive the change and the line managers, like myself in the past, would just be responsible for running the bank. So this differentiation between changing and running the bank. And also this is one of the principles that Ron put forward, hey, line drives the change. So managers, IT managers, they are responsible for the health of their teams and the health of the software, and nobody else. So is this interesting so far? Yeah? So, which brings us to how do you sell this, right? What I wanted to do here is hopefully inspire some of you who are in companies where things are not moving as fast, or maybe you were consulting to such companies. I'm using this term a lot. You heard it in the whole conference. Software is eating the world. But basically, you have to bring across a message of that we need to act and we need to act now. And this is a part of my work, basically telling all my colleagues that soon we will be eaten by one of Adrian's unicorns, and that we have to speed up. Yeah? So speed is market share, you heard it a lot, but I'm also using this one as a sales argument internally, because I need money for my platforms. We need money for our platforms. And people should really understand that speed comes from having these platforms ready and able, right? That you don't have to wait for 3 months to get a virtual machine that is securely configured, etc. That's no longer an option. This needs to be a push button thing. So the last one, the quality of an IT organization is the quality of its engineers. It's a quote by Ron. I admire this guy a lot. And why is this now so crucial? The funny thing is that in the last 6 months or so, I've come to a different understanding. We have the Agile in place. Our platforms are more or less in place or maturing. But I still see enormous differences between the productivity of engineers. Staggering differences. To give you an example, there was a little component that was needed, and a friend of mine, Ron Kersik, built it in 2 weeks, whereas the team that was supposed to build it claimed 6 sprints for it of 2 weeks, and the team was 8 people big, right? So if you think about it, that's a productivity difference of 48. And I've seen a lot more evidence of how we tend to overestimate or spend too much money on things, often or sometimes with a factor of 10. So maybe the next problem for us to solve is to understand what this difference between engineering skills really is. So the way I think of it really is that I live in 2 bubbles. Of course, the financial crisis, I work for a bank. It has hit us hard. We learned an awful lot, and we also learned what the concept of a bubble is. And I want to give to you the idea that we have a similar bubble when it comes to engineering skills. This is a piece that is not well understood. And we kind of ripped it apart, you know, the software engineering profession in the days of RUP, Rational Unified Process, when we said, okay, we have a requirements specifier. And of course, the guys who created it intended it only as a discipline, some piece of the skill set that you had to master. But we turned it into roles in our industry. We turned business analysis into a role. We turned design into a role. And we turned a role into a person who had a function. And then we turned developing into a role. Basically, he should put the design into code. And then we put tester into a role. And I really think, and I'm more and more convinced, that these are just skills of a good engineer. And it's a very nasty way of making projects very big, because you need to have all of these handovers between people. Whereas perhaps we have a responsibility even to focus on making sure that our people learn all these skills along the way, so we can be faster. This morning we had a talk about healthcare.gov, I think it was in the United States. And I read this fantastic article about it. It's called Coding for Uncle Sam. You should look it up. And this morning we heard that there was even more money spent on this program than I ever anticipated. But this article says, hey, we had an upfront investment of $200 million, and it didn't work. And we brought in 5 Silicon Valley engineers at the end, and they got it to work. And there's this big difference between this 200 million and these 5 Silicon Valley style engineers. And this article says, and I hope it's true, or that I'm not lying, but at least it's there on the web, you can find it, said, we forecasted 70 million per year for maintenance. Whereas the Silicon Valley guy said, hey, give us 4 million and we're satisfied. And these kind of huge productivity differences may also be a key that has to be added to this whole lean, agile, scrum thinking. We need better engineers, and we have a responsibility, therefore, to help them mature as better engineers. Does this still make sense? So, this was actually the title of a talk that I'm going to give one day. It's about the rebirth of the master builder, right? And the master builder stands for the role that I got, being an architect. And an architect, I think, in the past, in the medieval world, meant that you had grown as an artisan to the level that you could build a cathedral or a house or whatever, right? But you learned by doing it. You learned basically by practicing all the tricks of the trade until you mastered them. And I think, in a way, we need to go there again. Because I'm still having trouble, and perhaps I'm alone in this, that this whole new idea of an architect is this gentleman engineer who creates beautiful designs in pictures. I'm still having trouble understanding, will this ever really work for software engineering? Will this ever work if you don't have the skills and the mastery, if you haven't gone through all the work yourself to master these skills? And with the speed that technology is going, I think it's very hard to create designs that will stay out there, right? The speed that our company is changing with hundreds of teams basically changing the architecture a little bit every day, it's very hard for me to come up with the picture of how the bank is working today. It has become impossible. So what we did last Monday even, is we said we need a better model for this. And I met a guy once called Andy Hunt. I believe it was somewhere in Malmö, I don't know anymore, but he wrote this book about refactoring your wetware. He's one of those guys that also signed Andy Hunt, the Agile Manifesto. And this book has a certain flair and style, and you must like it. But the first piece was really interesting for me, because that's where he explained how people really learn. And this is the TheDreyfus Model of skill acquisition. And our experiment today is that we are using this model for our people strategy. You see, during this Agile journey, we did a lot of things, but just bringing in a lot of coaches and then saying, okay, now we're Agile, that's not it. We came across hurdle after hurdle that we had to fix, and one of it is our HR strategy. So we said, hey, let's really try to understand as a company how people learn. And this TheDreyfus Model basically says, you need to understand that when somebody is new at a task, that he needs recipes, right? If you're a cook, if you're a master cook, you know what the pinch of salt means, but the novice wants to weigh it because he doesn't know what it is. You need recipes, you need to be very strict. Advanced beginners can already find their way in tutorials. And you can see that they're at that level because they zoom in exactly to the place where they need to be. People who are competent, we defined as people who know how to basically solve a new problem all by themselves, which is including the requirements, getting them right, the domain model, getting that right, the test cases, getting that right, so that's unit testing, functional testing, load testing, resilience testing, getting that right, doing the coding themselves in at least one technology stack, and then we think you're competent. So the next level for us is, hey, when people are really have that kind of mastery and they become already really productive, Then we want to give them different challenges in different languages, basically grow their skill until they're these experts. I want to ask you to basically look up this book of Andy's, because perhaps there's a lot of ideas in there on how people learn, and perhaps we can make the industry a lot better by understanding how people learn at different phases. For example, if somebody's proficient, you should not send them to a training class. They will get bored. They will annoy the trainer. You don't want them in there. You should send them to conferences. And if you want to challenge them, make them become a speaker at the conference. So, then about those platforms, right? If you have hundreds of teams, then there's bound to be backlog dependencies between them. And you have to go look for how can I create these platform levels where they can just use stuff that is already there. Yeah. So that means that we put a lot of effort into shared engineering platforms, basically cobbling everything together. And for these platforms, there is less freedom. As my colleague before me said, at ING, we give a lot of freedom, that's true, but we don't want you to break the pipeline, and we want you to be at least on it, and if you then require a MongoDB database in a Docker container, well, go ahead, but make sure that the pipeline is also, it's added to the principles of the pipeline. So what you see here is a visualization of our pipeline. Another thing that we had to create, because otherwise for a large company it becomes very difficult to handle, is a data platform. So we distinguish really between the big data, and if I may say so, the slow data, and the real-time analytics. And we have a couple of guys really creating our real-time analytics platform into a open source project. And then there's, of course, our emerging Microservices Platform, where we use a lot of the open source technologies that are out there today. So this is a little bit of where we are. Now, of course, we want to have the people in our company really own the code, but also the design. We want them to think like designers. We want them to be really proud of how their software is designed. So here's a quote by my good friend Ron Kersik: "Everybody is a designer." And we're trying to get this culture of everybody is a designer going. My good friend Flavia: "Design like you give a damn." Yeah? So, and she really means it. It's fantastic to have those people in the house. So, and you can see it. You can see it with the platform teams, right? We call them squads these days. Some senior manager visited Spotify. And I think that was not really a bad idea, because we're at a point in time where we need to create our own words for the things that we're doing. And these platform teams, they came up with their own mission. And their mission is to make other teams awesome. Really awesome. And what you see is that what they created is not intended as a black box, but as a real community. So everybody can contribute to the platform. You can do a pull request. There's lots of time to discuss this with the folks who create the platforms. And the whole idea is for all our developers to be awesome. So, thank you very much, everybody.